Hi, everybody. So, this week's installation of the Sergeant at Arms is clearly going to be about James Comey's testimony in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Um, I want to jump right to the final answer, which is I believe him. I believe everything that he said. I think he did everything that he could given the circumstances. And I applaud him for making sure that everybody heard his story firsthand and not secondhand or in a private hearing that other people hear about some other way. I'm glad he did it the way he did. But I specifically want to address his opening remarks, which I felt were perfectly tempered given the circumstances. One of the things that was most impressive to me is when he spoke to the allegations that the FBI is in disarray, and that he felt completely defamed by the president saying the FBI is in disarray, that the ranks had lost faith in their leadership, and that somehow the investigations that were happening were just all over the place. He said that is a flat out lie. And I'm glad that he said it exactly like that. And that's probably the most pointed I saw him get throughout the whole testimony. But you know what? It was important that he said that, and he said everything that he needed to say to make it seem like he made sense. And given who he was interacting with, it's not difficult to make sense. But I also want to point out something else that he talked about, which was he talked about his meetings with President Trump. And so one of the senators said to him, well, if you knew that there was something wrong with the interactions you were having and you felt uncomfortable with them, why didn't you say something? And he said, well, I did say something. And he said something to A.G. Sessions, and A.G. Sessions really didn't say. At some point he said to A.G. Sessions, I don't think that I should be in the room alone with the president. It more or less might be construed as a conflict of interest. A.G. Sessions is his direct supervisor, and so that's really who should be talking to the president about whatever the FBI is doing. The FBI is an independent law enforcement agency, and so the president shouldn't really be weighing in on that anyway. One of the senator's the point the senator was trying to make was, how do you know that he was trying to do something inappropriate by asking you to be in the room alone and kicking everybody else out? So the answer to that is, what other reason would there have been? The answer to that is, President Trump wanted to make sure that there was no way there'd be a record of or any witnesses to whatever he was going to say to James Comey. He wanted to make sure that that was privileged conversation that nobody could vouch for other than him or Comey, and it would end up being his word against Comey's. Okay, well, and that's kind of where we are right now, but the catch is, now we have to decide who we believe, and unfortunately, our president has set himself up in such a way that it's hard to believe him because he changes his mind on a regular basis. He says things that are inflammatory. He says things that are insulting. It's just really hard to believe him or to be on his side. Another thing that came up that I found interesting was Senator Feinstein asked James Comey, or she said to him, you're a big guy. Why didn't you put your foot down when he asked you for loyalty, or when he said, why can't, you should let this go with regard to General Flynn? And James Comey's response was, maybe I should have been stronger. I don't know. No, the answer is, when you are in a position where you have a boss and you can be fired, you have to temper what you say. You have to watch the words that you use because you don't want to get fired. And the reason I think that's important is because Senator Feinstein doesn't have a direct boss. She's a senator. And so the only people she has to answer to really are the voters. Can the voters vote her out and then in effect she's fired? Sure. But there's more than one person for that to happen. There has to be more than one person for that to happen. And so they don't have a direct boss. And it always troubles me when people say things like, well, why didn't you stand up to your boss? Because it's your boss. And anybody who's ever been fired from a job or fears being fired from a job knows that you have to be very careful in the way you say things to your boss, because nobody wants to have to look for a new job. Nobody. I don't care what the circumstances are. Nobody. And you know, I've talked to lawyers, employment lawyers, who say, you know, I told my client, you know, the option has always been you can quit your job and get another job. Again, this is probably a lawyer who has too much money, and doesn't realize it's not that simple to just quit a job like that. So I found that really interesting that Senator Feinstein brought that up. And more than anything, she should have said, "You're a big guy. Why didn't you take a swing at him or something?" That would have been a better answer than, "Why didn't you just stand up to him?" In any event. So that was one thing that I thought was another thing I thought was interesting. But overall, I felt like his testimony um, corroborated his tenure. He did a good job, with the exception of, you know, figuring out what to do in the Hillary Clinton situation. I don't see where he made too many missteps. And the Hillary Clinton situation was a no-win situation because either way, he was going to have whoever ended up being president mad at him. But, you know, the writing was on the wall with regard to him being fired. It's pretty obvious that if he's being left alone in a room with someone, that person wants to convince him to do something. And so now we have the question of obstruction of justice. Is it obstruction of justice to suggest, and now they're saying President Trump only suggested that James Comey let the Flynn investigation go. When your boss makes a suggestion like that, you know what it means, period. So this really does, I feel this does rise to obstruction of justice. And some of the things that I've read have said, if you look back at the evidence in Watergate, if you look back at the evidence when President Clinton was impeached, if you look back through those sets of facts and the evidence presented based on those sets of facts, the evidence against President Trump is actually more compelling. And so now it's going to be up to Special Investigator Mueller to go through all those facts, determine whether it is obstruction of justice, and move forward if he needs to move forward. But, you know, President Trump is in a difficult position because, again, now he's saying he feels vindicated, and it's more of the alternative facts. He's living in a world of alternative facts where he's decided that he's the good guy in this situation and James Comey is the bad guy. So, you know, I'll leave this installation with one thing, and it is, as far as I'm concerned, the quote of the hearing, and that is, "Lordy, I hope there are tapes." And so tell me what you think about this. Tell me what you think about the hearing. Clearly there's going to be more to this, like there's always more to all of the things that surround President Trump. So leave me comments, tweet with me at SGTATARMSUSA, and we'll see where this goes as well. So I will close this installation of the Sergeant at Arms. See you next time.